Good morning, everybody. Betting for breakfast. We are live. Another Saturday morning. College football season is approaching, and we are back to give it to you at our new home, the Sharp app. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube page and go over to Twitter. Follow these guys on Twitter at the Sharp app as well. We have a ton of great betting content coming this football season. Dave, it's been a while since we've been able to talk some college football. We had a little bit of action over the spring in the FCS, but we are back. The fall is back. College football in full swing, and I am so excited for this season.
I am too, man. Finally, a full season and a new place to call us home. Nothing can go wrong. It's going to be awesome this year. We're going to get into it, each and every week like we did when we kicked this thing off. College football was our roots. And you know what grew from our roots? A Chanticleer. That's right. Yes. We got to learn about the Chanticleers, and we got to see them put some money in our pocket. That was our big winner last year. Got to give them props this year. Let's see who's our roots this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Coastal Carolina was a mainstay on our show last season, definitely bringing us home some cash. They had a lot of edges during the year that we were able to take advantage of. Going to be very exciting to see how things play out for them this year, them being the hunted as opposed to being the hunters. But we will get into that today. We have a fun preview set up, light preview. We're going to take a look at some of the teams, some of the betting odds in the Big 12 and the Pac-12. The Big 12 getting all the headlines, Dave. The big story is OU sneaking out the back door in the middle of the night with Texas, with eyes on the SEC. It looks like it's going to happen. When it's going to happen is the main question. Is it going to be 2025 when the rights expire? Or are they going to negotiate a release earlier? I read something saying they could leave as early as 2023. And of course, when the lawyers get involved and they start, poking and prodding the agreements, who knows when we'll see OU and Texas in the SEC, but it looks like it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, they got TV deals till 2025. So obviously, you're going to have to wait until then to go, but they need to announce or denounce that they're, keeping those rights going. So we're going to hear a little bit more about this in the upcoming weeks and, really upcoming months and years. But hey, is this typical Texas though? Right? They just seem to be that slimy backdoor type. I mean, I think they did it with the Texas Football Network. If you remember back in the day, they kind of built their own little TV network. And nobody from the Big 12 could come with them. And they took all the money and all that. Like, they just seem to always be about the money, right? I'm not surprised. And Oklahoma, they got to follow. Texas makes them the money. So, and they're the big rival. So I'm not too surprised Oklahoma tagged along, but I really believe this is Texas, heading this little move here. And, man, I mean, even with like the firing of, who was it back in the day? The big Charlie Strong, like they just do things different there.
A little bit dirty, a little bit different. But I'll tell you what, I can't blame these programs for wanting to go to the SEC and pretty much double their worth, right? I mean, they're going to just get so much more money there, and I think that's really where college football is heading. Is that it's they made a decision a long time ago that this was not about tradition, that this was about money, and I think we're just continuing seeing the onion get peeled back year after year. It started with the playoffs, and then the top, 4-6 programs really get all the recruiting edges, and they get more money because they're in the playoffs, and that stuff sort of spirals out of control. And now, we're seeing it with, the teams going to the SEC wanting to play against the top opponents. And that's really the only part that excites me, Dave, is if we can get more competitive schedules for these top teams, I think that'll be a plus out of the whole thing.
I agree. Do you think they watched what Texas A&M did? I mean, A&M and Missouri left in 2012, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at A&M's facilities now. I mean, they plucked Jimbo Fisher from Florida State. Texas A&M's facilities compared to Florida State right now look like, the Taj Mahal to like the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. It's a big difference, and money does that. I feel like that, and A&M ain't happy. But to get to your point, yeah, to get more competitive, to bring these regular season type of games into the fold in our college football watching on Saturdays, sign me up. I'm all for it. It's good for the fans. It's good for college football. It just doesn't feel like it's being done the right way. I mean, just get rid of all the conferences at that point. That's just my feeling.
I can understand that. It does feel like I think it's a little shocking for everybody, and they're kind of letting it marinate in. But letting Oklahoma play these top teams during the season, I think is a win for everybody. Maybe we can stop getting these as many games where we see Bama laying 35 in the first half. And let's talk about it from a betting perspective, right? I think that's one thing that'll change. I think is if we do get more super conferences, so to speak, and more competitive teams filling up these conferences, and it becomes more. Is almost like a tier system based on money and program power. I mean, we saw with Texas A&M, I think that was a great example, right? You can go over to rivals, top 6 in recruiting now, right? So the money brings the recruits, which, elevates your program. So, it's definitely the blueprint. And I think if we see that and we get more competitive games for these teams from a betting perspective, I think that, the full game markets will probably start to see a little more action. The first half markets, not as much because the games are going to be more competitive. We're not going to have all these weeks of where you have one team completely dominating another.
Yeah, I mean, good point. Who wins? It's TV, right? TV gets all the watchers, all the money, all the ads. And then as you get that and you see the betting market now being in front of all you on commercials, on your apps, you're right. That betting market now becomes a little bit more creative. A little bit wider and a little bit, more fun even for fans. Because like you said, it brings a lot of different game potentials into your betting when you get these competitive, close, big games. A lot more player props, I think, would be bet in these big games than you see in, your typical Alabama versus Vanderbilt. So, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think the market eventually, as the years progress, is going to continue to mature, and it'll be much closer to an NFL market as these top programs play more competitive schedules as they allow more teams into their conferences. And I think that's really what we're looking at. And, I'm all for competition. Well, it's so hard right now, even in college, to have that level of competition. I mean, we see, Bama hang 70 in a playoff game. I mean, like it's tough. There's a big gap between the have and the have-nots, but love college football. Can't wait for the season, but that is the big news out of the Big 12. Texas and Oklahoma, moving on to the SEC. When is it going to happen is really the question. I think they're both as good as gone. But let's talk about the Big 12 from a betting perspective, Dave. Everyone knows that this conference is all about Oklahoma, right? Yeah. And Iowa State is getting a lot of traction and well-deserved traction as they continue to build their program. Love what Matt Campbell is doing. But let's talk about the odds to win the Big 12, right? Not much value. It's pretty much a 2-horse race. We can talk a little bit about Texas if we want, but Oklahoma sits at the top, minus 180. 64% implied odds to win the Big 12. Iowa State plus 275, 26% implied odds. And when I look at those two teams, I still think Oklahoma is the team to beat. I like Iowa State, but I do have some concerns about Iowa State when they have to play elite competition. I think Oklahoma with Spencer Rattler coming back in his second season in that offense, obviously, one of the favorites to win the Heisman Trophy. He's just poised to have a huge year. And I think, when I look at those odds, I think the 180 might be a little short. Yeah,
it really might. I mean, wasn't there a blip on the radar for a hot second last year with Oklahoma? Like, oh no, what's wrong? And then, oh no, because Iowa State beat them the first game before they got to the title game, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so there was a little, what's happening? And it almost felt like Kansas in basketball in a way. They're always there. They're always winning. And Iowa State was rising. And then what do you know? Oklahoma wins. They win the Big 12, and they win it pretty handily, too. I mean, I know it got tight at the end. Purdy drove a few late drives down. And then they're the cream of the crop. And then I feel like you had your chance last year is the point I'm getting to. You had your chance to take down, Goliath last year. But now they're restocked. They got that fake year under their belt, just got the reps in. And now Rattler's back, which I didn't think I wasn't a huge fan of his performance last year until late. And I started to see him, the skill set that he really does have and him starting to mature. And I think they're heavy favorites. I mean, I would put minus 180. It's easy money for me to lay on Oklahoma in this one. I just see the next tier down, which is your Iowa State and Texas, being 2-3 big steps down.
Yeah, it's almost like I think Iowa State's a step down, and I think Texas plus 800 to win it right for a reason. And I like Texas this year. Like I think the market is undervaluing them. We'll talk a little bit about them, but I like Sark, man, and I think Sark's going to do some good things there. But let's talk about Oklahoma and Spencer Rattler coming back. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Is last year was almost, I felt like Iowa State's chance to really make a dent. Like if teams are going to capitalize on Oklahoma, now they come back, right? The defense is refueled. The defense is going to be much, much stronger. And that was really the issue with them last year. It was a combination of the defense a little bit soft and Spencer Rattler adjusting to the college game, right? His splits from when he was in the pocket and delivering the ball on time were much better than when he was, scrambling out plays, breaking down, trying to throw off platform, right? All those things. The game got a little bit fast for him. I felt like when plays started to break down, when he hold on to the ball and try and do too much. So the maturity aspect that you talk about, Dave, I think is huge with Spencer Rattler. So now, last year was, the pandemic season, right? They didn't get the reps that they thought going into the season. It was kind of like a crazy season. Now he's got that under his belt. Full off season in Lincoln Riley's offense, those two working hand in hand. And I'm excited. I think it's going to be fireworks for this OU offense. I think it's going to be fireworks for Spencer Rattler. But I think that is the key, is them having this full off season, and already having games under his belt in this offense. I think Oklahoma is going to be right there. I think they widen the gap between them and Iowa State than what we saw last year.
I agree. I mean, my lasting image of Oklahoma is they decimated. They destroyed Florida. And it'll come back to say, Pitt's, trash, all with some injuries. Yo, Cease, what's up, my friend? Good checking in. Good to hear from you. Always loving it. Hey, our boy Ricky looking all right this week. I know he had a little action on some Ricky Fowler too. But listen, that lasting image of how well they played. And now Rattler's talking about he's put on, 15, 20 extra pounds of muscle. I think he's coming in at 210 because he did look a little, rail thin.
Right. Yeah, right. Frail.
Yeah, yep. And that didn't matter about his arm. He always had the arm, but just to be able to take those hits. And the fact of the matter is, you said it, I said, but coming over the last 7 games last year, 15 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He really started to become that more mature of a quarterback that, in the first few games, I was like, I think this guy's just out here Michael Vicking it. Like it just looked like he was just running around and trying to make plays, trying to be faster, because that's what you were in high school.
I think that was the problem, is there was scoreboard pressure in a lot of those games because the defense was not as strong as it's going to be this year. And then he felt like he was almost trying to do too much. So he's running around, making these crazy plays, not seeing the college game pretty much for the first time on a week-to-week basis. And I think that it took him a little while to settle down. Yeah,
I agree. And I mean, the sky's the limit for this team. I mean, you got Kennedy Brooks coming back off a missed season, was running back, thinking about NFL, did not go. He has 2,000 career yards. You got a transfer from Tennessee, Eric Gray. They're loaded at running back, which, as we saw last year, they do pretty well with transfers, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my man from Ohio State, Sermon, right? Well, no, Sermon went to Ohio State. I'm sorry, he went to
Ohio State. Yeah,
but they've done well with transfers in the past. I mean, this team is just, now you take Tennessee's best player and you bring him into your stable. I mean, they're loaded on offense. This is a 50-point machine ready to come.
Yeah, I mean, they got a wide receiver that transferred in from Ohio State, going the other direction from Ohio State. I thought that was where you were going, and he's going to be right in the mix starting for them. Couldn't get on the field at Ohio State. We'll talk about them, in weeks to come, but their wide receivers probably got the top 2 wide receivers in the nation. It's just incredible what they're doing over there. But OU definitely stacked both sides of the ball. And I think that's going to be the big difference with this team, is going to be the improvement on defense. But this is not a slight to Iowa State and what the Cyclones are doing. Let's talk a little bit about them, Dave. Plus 275. Obviously, to win the Big 12, don't like them at that number, 26% applied odds. But we're looking at a win total of 9, minus 130 to the over, plus 110 to the under. A lot of people liking the Cyclones, liking what Matt Campbell is doing. Quarterback Brock Purdy comes back 35-1 to win the Heisman. We had a lot of fun with Brocktoberfest last year. Sometimes it cashed in, sometimes it didn't. A little bit of inconsistency early on for Purdy. But what I really like about this team is how they're built right? They have a young but experienced offensive line. I really like Breece Hall. He's going to be the engine of this offense. I feel like Iowa State has one of the best tight end combinations in the country. They spread the ball around. My question with them offensively and why I kind of have them a step behind in Oklahoma is I just don't think they're explosive enough on the outside. And I think college is really about explosive plays, getting those big plays. We see these teams put up 50, 60, 70 in the playoffs against some of the best defenses in the country. So you really need that explosive element. I just don't know if they have enough of that. When I look at the defensive side of the ball, obviously going to be lights out under Campbell, strong linebacking core. You're really starting to see the team take on Campbell's personality. I like them. I think they're going to be right there in the mix. Definitely a top 20 team, could possibly be top 10, but I just don't think they're at Oklahoma's level yet.
I agree, but I will tell you, one of my best bets of the show today is going to be Iowa State over the 9 that you mentioned. Their out-of-conference schedule is just, they're playing Northern Iowa. They're playing Iowa tough, but they get them at home, right? And then they got UNLV. And then after that, you get the slop of the Big 12, but you get Texas at home. So you got 2 coin flip games that we just talked about, Iowa and Texas, both at home. Just say you split one of them, right? You split them. Your only other loss is Oklahoma. That's 10-2. So for me, that's really good odds for me to be able to sit there and say, I got 2 home games that are coin flips, and I'm probably a 3-point or less favorite. And I got to win one of them to get over that 9 because they're not losing at Texas Tech, at TCU, or TCU's at home. They're not losing Kansas, K-State, Baylor.
Well, I do agree with you. I think September, October is very soft. I love the way the schedule plays out for this team. Over the 9, I think, is definitely a good play, even at the minus 130. But the Texas Tech game, Dave, I think is interesting. Right now, I don't know if this is going to be a loss for them. I'm not advocating Texas Tech on the money line, but I'm going to be very interested to see this number. This might be a play on for Texas Tech just because it's a situational spot, right? This is a sandwich game in between Oklahoma, those 2 games against Oklahoma and Texas. So do we see a little bit of a letdown traveling to Texas Tech? It's one of those games that I have my eye on when we get there, that this is a huge sandwich spot and we could see a letdown. Am I going to be playing Texas Tech money line? Probably not, right? But I'm going to be very aware of what that number is, and I'm going to look to probably fire off it early because we're probably going to get some steam during the week on that when people realize where this lands in the schedule.
Yeah, it's a great point, but I guess the way I'll look at it is they're either rolling into that game at 9-1 or 10-0, or I should say 8-1 or 9-0, and that's just how I feel. And if that's the case, yeah, you could have a slip up. But if I'm sitting at 9-0 and I'm looking ahead to Oklahoma and I get a slip up, I'm still getting my over, right? I'm a little more scared if they're 7-2 and they've lost to Texas and Iowa. Yeah, that game really becomes tough.
Tough motivational spot, right? Yeah. I hope they go in 9-0 because I want a bigger number with the Red Raiders there, right? I want the biggest number I can get. I don't need them to win outright, but I'm definitely good. It's going to be a play on for Texas Tech for me. But Iowa State, going to be tough, and it's great to see what Matt Campbell is doing with that program. Breece Hall, obviously, is going to be huge. Tremendous. Yeah, he's going to be huge for them this season, just absolutely huge. But before we get to the Pac-12, Dave, let's talk a little bit about Texas. I alluded to it early. Sark takes over a program, and obviously they're making the headlines going to the SEC, and I think that they are going to be pretty strong under Sark. I think they got the hire right, and I don't think that Sark's a guy who gets enough credit for what he did at Alabama and how that offense looked. You look at Mac Jones, the success that Mac Jones had. The quarterback in Texas is a question mark, right? Sure. They're hoping Hudson Card can step up. But I think that when you take a guy like Sarkisian and his play design and what he was able to do from a schematic standpoint at Alabama, there's not probably another coach in the league that I would want with a young quarterback trying to get the best out of him in this position where he's taking over a program. They're a 3-loss team, but if you look at the losses that Texas had, I think this team has a lot of talent. They lost that crazy 4 overtime game to Oklahoma, right? They were beating Iowa State the whole game until the end. They should have beat TCU. I think they turned the ball over. I think they might have fumbled at like the 1 yard line, or it was inside the 5 yard line in that game. It was crazy, but they were very competitive in all three of those games. And it was a crazy year from a preparation standpoint, whatnot. Now you get an upgrade at coaching, I believe, especially on the offensive end. I think the defense is going to be better than people think. They got a strong defensive line, so they're very strong up front. They got 3 starters back on the secondary. Not a lot of depth, so if they get some injuries there, they're going to be in trouble. But when I look at this Texas team, I think they're going to surprise some people. They travel to Iowa State in November and TCU. You know, if they can steal TCU, you know, can they go over the win total? 8 over the 8 is a plus 105 plus money. Dave, you know, I love me some plus money.
Yeah, we all do. Hey, it is plus money. Sarkisian taking over for Tom Herman. I'll tell you that much. That guy, again, Texas hasn't really been able to get it right since Mac Brown. And I think they've got it now. I feel pretty good.
I like the hire. I like the hire a lot.
I feel pretty good about Sark. He's a guy, and you know, Saban, you know, he kind of revives these guys. He gives them another chance, but in the same thing, you got to earn it. And I'm glad Sark's getting a second chance here. And I think, you know, it's almost a second lease on life. And I think he's going to take a really good advantage of this. He's already plucked a couple guys from Alabama, bringing in Keelan Robinson, the running back from his old offensive staff. But the stud running back there at Texas right now is Bijan Robinson. You're talking about, you know, a conference that really does stack up with some awesome running backs. We just talked about Breece Hall. Bijan's right there. Tough, different runner, but really strong and fast. One gap, one cut, go. And the quarterback is definitely a question mark, but I don't know about you. I thought Sam Ehlinger sucked. Now, I say this from the standpoint of, yeah, he had his flashes where he was really good, but you talked about the fumble at the one in TCU. I think that was him. I think he would always break your heart, man. He could beat the Kansases. He could go toe to toe with Oklahoma once a year, but he would know how to throw up a stinker. I don't know how much worse you can get. You know, you got the talent there. I know they're battling out with 2 quarterbacks that are unknown, but I think they're going to be all right. I'm with you. I do think they're still third. I think it's just going to take some time to get Sarkisian's kind of fingerprints on this team, but they're going to be good. I do believe you.
Yeah, I think they're.
But Iowa State is still a notch above, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And, you know, top 14 in recruiting class, you know, for 2021. I think they're going to big things head into the future, especially with them going to the SEC. It's only going to help these rumors. Sark's definitely going to be able to recruit. And if he can develop this quarterback, there's going to be big things ahead for this program. But let's get into the Pac-12, Dave, which is going to be a little more competitive, right? You know, we know this kind of a 2-horse race with Sooners and the Cyclones. But let's go over to the Pac-12. We have a ton to talk about there. And this is where it really gets fun. And, you know, we can start with the North. Oregon, obviously, the favorites, you know, to win the North, to win the division, minus 110, Washington plus 140. And then you get the Cals and, you know, everybody else under that. I think Cal's 12-1, you know, really not competitive. When we look at the Pac-12 odds overall, we have Oregon at plus 250, Washington plus 360. And then you have USC plus 380, Arizona State plus 450, Utah plus 600, and then, you know, you get down to UCLA at 12-1, whatnot. But the real, I think if we start at the top, we're going to be looking at the Ducks and the Huskies, right? I mean, they're the 2 odds-on favorites, you know, to win this conference, and, you know, both in the North Division. What are your thoughts on either of these teams?
Well, I'll just start off by saying the Pac-12, they're pretty smart, man. They did some pretty sharp things to try and get one of these teams into the college football playoffs. USC, Oregon, and Washington, your 3 favorites. You mentioned the 2 out of the North, 1 out of the South. They get 5 home games, 4 away. USC, case in point, they don't play Washington or Oregon. And now Washington, they don't get USC, but they get, you know, Oregon at home, UCLA at home, all their tough games at home. So when you do look at the North and you start to try and figure out, you know, where these teams settle, it's definitely a 2-horse race in the North, Oregon, Washington. And the advantage looks slightly towards Washington based upon, you know, where they're going to play their home games. But I got Oregon. I really do think what Mario Cristobal is doing there now. And I do like Anthony Brown, the transfer quarterback from Boston College. I know he was able to get in, I think, the Rose Bowl a little bit last year. He came in a little late, played a few snaps, started to show that he could be a factor for this team. He's kind of in that mold of, a really athletic quarterback, but he can play in the pocket. And then the news of C.J. Verdell, the stud running back, coming back, not opting for the NFL. Same with Johnny Johnson III. You got the stud on defense, defensive player of the year from Pac-12. I'm losing the tip of the tongue, the linebacker, but they're loaded. They're loaded as they've ever been. This isn't your Oregon Ducks of the past post Chip Kelly era. This is what.
No, they're big and they're physical. They can play with these top programs. From a physicality standpoint, really like Oregon and what they're doing. You talked about the linebackers, probably the best core in the conference, right? You have Flo, you have Sewell's brother Noah, and then you got the other kid. Don't sleep on Mace Funa. So they got three guys that are like really strong. The wide receivers, Johnny Johnson, Pittman, Devin Williams. So they have talent here. And I like Anthony Brown. Like I thought, quarterback last year was a big problem for them with the turnovers. They were minus 14 in turnover margin last season. They returned 16 starters. So the offense gets 9 starters back on that side of the ball, 6 of them offensive linemen. And I think that's the difference, is that this is just they're just a very physical team. You know what I mean? And you think Oregon and you don't think that, but on both sides of the ball, it's exactly what they are. And, when you look at Washington being, their top competition, same thing. Big physical offensive lineman. Jimmy Lake wants downhill rushing. They got 10 starters back. They probably got the best secondary in the Pac-12 on defense. And that's how you get stops in the red zone. That's how you get stops on defense, is with your secondary. They also have questions of quarterback. Is it going to be Dylan Morris? Is it going to be Howard? From a scheduling perspective, when I look at Washington, right, they get Oregon, they get Arizona State at home. But they have back-to-backs in November. They travel to Michigan in week 2. So it's going to be tough. I think the challenge that I have with Washington being able to compete with Oregon and really being able to steal the Pac-12 is that they're very predictable in offense, and I think that has to change. Like, they run on running downs, they pass on passing downs, and it's pretty straightforward. They have to get more creative on offense. They don't have a lot of explosiveness. I talked about how, key I feel like that is, Oregon has explosive players on offense that they can kind of lean on. The Huskies are just going to try and grind you out. Like, that's really how they are. So when I look at those two teams, I do favor Oregon. I think the way the odds move, Dave, is pretty interesting, because in May, we had in May, Oregon was the favorites. They were plus 225, and I think Washington was plus 425. And then it flipped in June, and Washington became the favorites. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of seen it kind of move and settle back out. So they've been flip-flopping a little bit. Like, there was a time in June where Washington was really the favorites to win the Pac-12, but that's kind of simmered down and settled now that we're getting closer to the season. And I think that's warranted. I think that it probably is Oregon's conference to lose, even though Washington doing good things there with Jimmy Lake.
Yeah, I agree. And when I'm looking at the Oregon schedule, let's be honest, they're going to win every home game. There's not really a challenge at home. No, not one. Colorado, no. But the road games, it's at Ohio State, loss. And at Washington, lost. The other 3 road games they have are at Stanford, win. At UCLA, I think, is a win. I do think Chip's getting a little better, but I just don't think his style is going to keep up with. I think he's going to try to go point for point, and I don't think that works. And then I go at Utah. That's going to be your game that you really have to, decide if you want to take the over on this team or not. And for me, I'm probably not as high on Utah as a lot of people. I just think they're a little too slow in this modern era of run and gun. I like Oregon over the 9 a lot, and I like them to win the North.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think the over the 9 is probably a play. You can get it minus 110. Yep. And like I said, to win the North, you can get a minus 110 as well. You get some plus money if you pick them to win the Pac-12 altogether. But I do think they are a step ahead of Washington. Let's go over to the Pac-10 South, though. The Pac-12 South. I apologize.
Yeah, that's all right.
And it's going to be the Pac-20 soon, it seems like, if these Big 12 people who aren't going to the SEC end up merging with the Pac-12. That's been the latest rumor. So, it'll be fun to see how that plays out. But going over to the Pac-12 South now, USC, the favorite at plus 160, Arizona State right behind them, plus 220, Utah, plus 280. You talked about them. And then you have UCLA way in the back at plus 600. I think I agree with you where UCLA can probably get some wins, but they might, have a surprising upset here and there. But I don't think that they are consistent or strong enough from a roster perspective to really compete with those top three teams. And I think it's, USC, and then, you have Arizona State and you have Utah, which I both think are pretty live. Like I like both those teams, to be honest with you. They can be competitive in the South, and it's very hard to handicap this division, I feel like, because USC and a lot of these teams like Arizona State, such a weird season last year. We didn't see much of them at all. Like they only played, I think Arizona State only played 4 games. They blew those 2 leads in weeks 1 and 2. And then they had that 70-7 win against Arizona. I remember we hit that when we covered on that one with these. That was a little rocking chair game. And then I think they followed up the season with a win, but a lot going on in Arizona State. Herm Edwards under fire, for some recruiting issues during the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But what are your thoughts, Dave, on USC, and how live do you think Arizona State and, perhaps Utah? I know you said you think they're a little bit slow to compete, but what are your thoughts on them as far as, being able to win the South, or is there any other value on the odds board that you see?
Yeah, so I mean, this one I spent a lot of time on. I really enjoy this conference, or this part of the conference, just from a simple fact of you're getting, like you said, you got a 3-horse race. If you're a UCLA alum, or you send them a little bit a booster, you might think it's 4, but I don't think they're quite there yet. Let me just hit UCLA just real fast. I do think. I mean, listen, last year it's 3 straight losing seasons under your boy Chip Kelly. So this is a big one for him, right? I mean, I think he's got to at least make a bowl game here. They did lose their 3 games last year 4 games last year, 3 and 4 by combined 15 points. So they really did compete. They blew a ton of leads. I just think they're sloppy still, and that just shows from the head coach. I don't know. That's just me. I know everybody's in love with Chip, but I do think they're a win total of 7. I do think they get over and get to a bowl. I think they have 92% of their starters returning. I think this is it for Chip. He's brought in linebackers from Bama, from LA Cajo and Notre Dame. I think over the 7, I like UCLA, but they're still 4th. So now I'll move up to my 3rd place team. That is Utah. Maybe it's me seeing who they're going to start at quarterback. Tell me I'm wrong. But when you bring in Charlie Brewer from Baylor, and I watched that guy suck upon suck last year, I just can't see how that's an upgrade for them. I know they're talented. They're bringing back 10 starters on offense. Brewer's the only kind of, new piece. They could go with sophomore Cam Rising. He won the job and then got hurt. But either way, I think that the quarterback position being unsettled there. I know Kyle Whittingham's a good coach. They went 3-2 last year and won the last 3. I don't know. I think that's too big of a position to when you're going against the USCs and the Arizonas that are firepower, and Utah is more that, I want to slow you down. They were terrible in the red zone, awful on 3rd downs. How does Charlie Brewer improve that? That's why I'm a little soft.
The quarterback's the big question with Utah. I kind of like them. Like I do think they can compete. Are they going to be able to overtake USC? Probably not, but Whittingham called this the best offensive line of his tenure, and I think that's really how they're going to win games. And I think you hit the nail on the head is if they get down early and have to come back, they're probably a bet off team. You know what I mean? Like it's probably live bet time because that they just don't have the firepower to come back. But the defensive line has been a recruiting focus. I think they're going to win in the trenches with TJ Pledger from OU, running the ball. They have 19 returning starters. So I think last year was a weird season for them. They had, first 2 games are canceled. So, it's hard with this division. It's really hard to take anything from last year, but I think that they're going to stay in games. I like them as a dog in situations because of the style that they play, but they're going to be pretty tough in the trenches. But I do agree with you that if they have to come back, if they get down 10, 14 points, they're going to be in trouble, because they just don't have it at the quarterback position.
Yeah. And I mean, depending how they, I do see them losing at USC, but that Oregon game, circle it on your calendar. That one's late in the season, could have, some huge implications for the title. They're going to be good. Don't get me wrong. 8.5 a win total. I'm just not sure I'm ready to put some money down on. I might even lean the under. It's plus money on the under on that one. So my second place team, USC. I like me some USC. Don't get me wrong. And I like what Clay Helton's doing there. Keaton Slovis can't be worse than last year, right? I mean, he's a potential Heisman Trophy candidate, just like Spencer Rattler. He's a potential top 10 pick in the NFL draft if he gets it right this year. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do. If he gets it right and he gets it rolling, he's going to be right there. We know how the NFL loves quarterbacks.
Yes, absolutely. And this is like a Justin Herbert. They're going to be able to sling it around. He had 7 interceptions in 7 games last year. He was a little rough, very loose with the ball, fumbled a few times too. But with all that said, he's got the talent and he's got the playmakers around him. And they brought in 5-star defensive lineman Corey Foreman, the number 1 blue chip prospect in all the land and a potential first round, top 3 pick in the NFL. So they're going to be loaded on defense as well. Very, very good team. Receiver Drake London, potential NFL prospect. We know about their ability at running back. They actually brought in a Texas transfer in Keontae Ingram. They're good, man. They are very good. I just worry a little bit about the protection of the football. And, again, they're set up. Their path is easy. I'm going way over on this team. They're not playing any of the hard teams. No Oregon, no Washington. Their hard game is Notre Dame.
Notre Dame on the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you lose that one, but 8.5? You tell me I get 3 losses?
Yeah, I don't expect Notre Dame to be as tough as they were last. I think it's going to be a little bit of a down year for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I do too. But you got 3 losses in your bag, in your pocket to play with. And I mean, UCLA is always the tough game for them just because last year they had to sneak one out late. But I expect them to be really good right there this year. But the one team I do think they'll lose to is your boy Herm and the Arizona State Sun Devils. Now, I'm saying this with a caveat. They got a little bit of issues going on with the COVID situation there right now. Some news coming out of Tempe is that they just ignored all protocols and let some things go they shouldn't have, and we'll see, right? So I got to put just a little asterisk on that now. Let that thing play itself out, but it better play itself out fast because they're starting practices early August. Media day in the Pac-12 is this Tuesday, July 27th. Something's got to give soon, but
Herm's going to get some heat.
He is going to get some heat, but hey, this team, you saw it last year. They led the Pac-12 in scoring and defense. Drums, you said it. They only played 4 games, and one of them was 70-7. So pretty easy to lead when you have that. But
skews the numbers a little bit.
Yeah, a little. But with that said, they do have the best. Like Keaton Slovis is great, but I think this guy could be the best quarterback in the conference. And Jane Daniels, he's special. He's good. And the offensive coordinator said last year he even had a bad year. And so the sky's the limit. They're really banking on. They're bringing back 86% of their starters and production. Like they're loaded. If this isn't the year, I mean, they went to the Rose Bowl. Last time they went to the Rose Bowl, Jake Plummer, 96.
Yeah.
96. I think it's their time. They have one of the best secondaries in the country. They're loaded. They have 3 potential all Pac-12 players on the back line there. And we know what type of league this is, a very heavy passing league. And the offense is just, I mean, it's incredible. And they brought in another transfer from Utah and wide receiver Brian Thompson. He's your veteran, but they have 5-star, 4-star recruits everywhere up and down. They're explosive. They're good. I think they win this half of the conference. I think they're playing Oregon in the Pac-12 title.
Wow, you like them. So plus 220s will play for you to win the South with Arizona State. And listen, I do agree with you 100% on Daniels. He's bulked up in the offseason, 35-1 to win the Heisman. Keaton Slovis, 28-1. We know Slovis going to have a field day with Drake London all season. So when we look at these 2 teams, USC and Arizona State, and try and find where the value is, it's hard because it's going to depend, and I think we're going to be able to tell early in the season with Keaton Slovis how much he has developed, how much he's ready, Dave, because you talked about how he was loose with the football, right? Does he mature? Does he kind of sew that part of his game up as he gets ready for the NFL, right? That's a big question, because one of the positives I saw from USC last year and Slovis is he brought him back in some games. I mean, there were games like that Arizona State game, they were dead. I was on Arizona State in that game. He brought them back. He brought them back week after week. So no quitting that team, no quitting him. And I think that's going to play well for them. And they have such an easy schedule. You talked about it with USC. But I think, with these two teams, a very fascinating part about it, Dave, when we're trying to handicap it, is you have Herm Edwards and, over in USC, Clay Helton on the hot seat as well. Both these teams really, for different reasons, right? Like Herm might be in a little bit of trouble just because they're like, hey, you know what? Like, we brought you in here so we wouldn't have to deal with these types of things. And now you're bringing all this heat upon us. But I think it's a big year for USC and they for that program. And kind of if they lose this, division, the South at Arizona State, I think it could be trouble for them. So lots of pressure, I feel like, on both teams. I think it's going to be fascinating, but I do think the South is there for the taking. Arizona State and Utah, both top 20 in Phil Steele's power poll. So very two intriguing teams. I think that when I look at these two divisions in the Pac-12, this is the one that you can target. Whether you like Arizona State or whether you like Utah, you kind of have to look at those teams and make your distinction. But I think both teams are live here to win the South over USC when we're looking at the numbers. Utah plus 280, Arizona State plus 220. I think that's where the value is on the board.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, your point about USC and Clay Helton, I agree, but from the same standpoint of they're starting to get this talent. And I mean, just getting the, stud defensive lineman Corey Foreman this year, the number one recruit in the nation. Win or lose, that sometimes is more important. And if Clay's really starting to build that culture back up at USC, that, Pete Carroll way, I think he might get a little bit of a rope if he does lose to Arizona State this year. We'll see. I think his leash is a little longer, but if they go, God forbid, if they go 7-5, I mean, we're talking a different story for sure.
Yeah, big problem. And I think all three of those teams, I think their win totals are at 8.5.
They are. So I'm in love with Arizona State and USC over, and one's got to go under. So that's why I'm not gonna bet the Utah under, but I am gonna bet the other two over.
Yeah, I think Utah's gonna play a little bit better than you might be giving them credit for. We'll see how that plays out. With Arizona State, I'm a little bit concerned about. I want to see Herm survive.
Yeah,
and get in there. People are saying that it might be Pierce that goes, and does Herm shift the blame over to Pierce? They get Pierce out of there. I don't know, but I want to see how that plays out, and if that drags into the season, how much, is there discipline handed out? What really goes down with that situation? I think that brings a little bit of variance with the two teams, but I just wish Utah, I think, is just a quarterback away. Like if they had an answer, a quarterback, I would really be comfortable firing on them.
Yeah, and this kid Cam Rising might be. He, like I said, he won the job. I think it was back in 20, like in the fall, and then got hurt, so he couldn't play last year. So he's right there. Maybe, I'd start you over Charlie Brewer. But I mean, as far as Arizona State goes,
I can sling it, brother. I
know you can. I seen you at shortstop.
We got to go a little West Coast offense, right? I don't know how vertical I can get nowadays. I'm getting up there in age, but we do some dig routes, some slant routes, dude. I can get it on there on time.
I just need the velocity in the short routes. I'm good with that. But listen, Arizona State, you're going to know everything. Come game one, I think they got BYU at BYU game one. You didn't know where that team's headed. They get blown out of that game. It's going to be a long season. But if they have the energy and the momentum that they had last year, and they're hyped up, and it's all everybody's against us, it's going to be a good thing for Arizona State. Listen, their schedule is a little tough. 8.5 is probably a little aggressive, but in Herm, I trust, man.
I love Herm, and I hate to see this because I would be a play on Arizona. I loved them last year. I think I bet them in all 4 games probably last year. I loved what they were doing, and it just this violation stuff just worries me. I need to get that out of the way. But listen, we're going to wrap up. Season's going to be here before you know it, right? And, it actually starts end of August. Early look, Nebraska, laying 8 against Illinois. We got a little Hawaii UCLA late night action for the
Yeah.
people. It looks like Hawaii's getting 16.5 against Chip Kelly. Any initial thoughts, right? We know we didn't punch anything in on these yet. You know, we still got to break these down. We got plenty of times. But when you look at those two games, any initial thoughts? Scott Frost under a ton of pressure already in Nebraska. Like, you want to talk about the pressure cooker getting hot. He is jumping from the frying pan into the fire. Like, if he doesn't start winning games in Nebraska, he's really got to get his act together. Laying 8 points on the road against Illinois, which, you know, it's Illinois, but here we are. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know how comfortable I am laying any points at Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, it's no, I'm not. And I mean, to a point, I think some of the boosters wanted him out last year. So he is definitely living on his probably 9th life there. And it's going to have to start off with a big win at Illinois. Illinois, I actually think, if I remember right, they were a team that competed in some games last year and then got smoked in others. They were a weird team. Like, you got them at the right time. They moved the ball, but they were a sieve on defense. So they might actually match up okay with Nebraska. So, yeah, I mean, with Scott Frost's job, I might lean Nebraska in that one. And then the Hawaii UCLA game, it's like I said, I think it could be chip or bust this year. And I think he's got his, you know, they lost too many close games last year. The focus has to be to get out a hot start, make a message. They're talented. 92% of stars back. I like them in that game. 16 is a lot. But I do like, I might lean both faves. Just looking now. I mean, I got to do a little more.
Yeah, I didn't see any point totals on either of them, but that Hawaii UCLA one should be pretty high.
Oh, I thought you said two totals. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I didn't see any point totals, so I don't know. Over under, I'm not sure about. I don't know if they have them out. Don't have them out on DraftKings yet, but have to dig a little deeper as we get closer. But I agree. That's the main thing I'm going to be looking at is this Nebraska team and Scott Frost. He has to come out with a big win. You know, the offense has been terrible. They can't really run the ball. You know, they get all their rushing production out of their quarterback. You can't throw the ball.
He was there 8 years too, and he kept getting a starting job, like that Martinez cat.
He was awful, man.
Awful.
He was just bad. Yeah, he was just bad. So Frost really needs. I mean, he might not make it through the season if he don't come out winning, come out swinging. So going to be very interesting. Can't wait for the season. Season. We're going to be back. Going to be traveling next week. We'll be back the following weekend. But once we get into the season, we're going to be firing. We're going to be here with the Sharp app every single Saturday to get you the bets, to get you the edges so we can all cash. It's going to be tremendous. It's going to be such a fun year. So many storylines going into this season. I am just thrilled, Dave, for college football to be back.
I am, bud. This is great. Like I said, it's what we kind of, you know, hung our hats on and had a great time last year and got us through the pandemic, but no getting us through the pandemic this year. It's going to be ready, roaring, real football, real crowds, you know, just full schedule.
Yeah, home field advantage, packed houses. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be everything that we missed, tailgate parties, the whole nine, the whole college football experience. And we're here to give you all the edges. So listen, make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow the Sharp app on Twitter to get all the updates, all the content at the Sharp app, APP, on Twitter. Make sure you do that. And we will be back every Saturday morning betting for breakfast. Wake up with some winners. College football is coming, and we are here to get you involved and make you a part of all the action. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we will see you in the coming weeks.